Hello again, dear participants, dear speakers. We are back from the Brussels studio for this seminar, organized under the auspices of the CNUE training program, Europe for Notaries, Notaries for Europe, which is co-funded by the European Union from the judicial training financing line. And we can, if all participants and all speakers are connected, and I think this is the case, it is confirmed by the technical team, we could step in the topic of the second panel, which is dedicated to the relationship practitioner and competent authorities. So what do the competent authorities of the obliged entities expect? Dear Eftichia Karastathi, notary in Evias, close to Athens. How lucky you are. Welcome. You are the right hand of our president, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Greek Notariate. You have the floor for this panel.
Thank you very much, Raul. Good afternoon to everyone. As you heard, my name is Eftichia Karastathi. I am a civil notary in Evia, an island near Athens, and I'm also the representative of European Affairs in the Greek Council of Notaries. The topic of our panel is actually very interesting because it has to do with the collaboration between competent authorities and obliged entities. So we will discuss the results of the cooperation between the public and private sector, both its success stories and its weaknesses. But we will also discuss what is expected by both sides in the furthering and improving such a collaboration. The level of awareness, the level of consistency, and the level of compliance, but also the level of guidance that is given by the competent authorities are points to be developed. The participants in our panel are the Honourable Theo Bill, which is an investigative judge and member of the European Judicial Training Network. Clara Bonacci, which is the manager in guidance and outreach in the Financial Intelligence Analysis Unit in Malta. Noe de la Rubia Gonzalez in the Financial Crimes Unit in Interpol. Roger Kaiser, Senior Policy Advisor in Tax and Compliance in European Banking Federation. Angela Foyle, which is the Chairman of the Anti-Money Laundering Working Party in Accountancy Europe. Stephanie Serrault, a civil law notary in Paris. And Ignacio Goma-Lanzon, which is the Chair of the Anti-Money Laundering Group in CNUE. So, with no further ado, I would actually would like to ask the participants, and I would like to start with the competent authorities and the participants of the competent authorities, and ask the judge of our panel in what does he thinks that are the main problems that he encounters regarding member states, member countries in money laundering investigations.
Mr. Theobil, can you unmute your microphone, please? Thank you.
Okay, this would be better.
It's perfect.
So maybe, thank you for the question. Maybe it's good first to clarify that in Belgium, that an investigating judge is dealing with the cases himself, investigating the cases himself, which a bit comparable with the prosecutor in other countries. We don't have the prosecutor-led system. Anyhow, based on my experience dealing with cases and investigating cases, I see three categories of problems. The first category is the reporting, the problem about the reporting of the entities. What I see, or what we see doing the investigations during investigations in other cases, and we see suspicious transactions that are not reported. The second category of problems is about the lack of capacity in the reporting entities. This is especially a problem when we ask additional information. And the third, and it's a specific problem coming forward more and more in investigations, is the interference and damage that the investigation or the case is undergoing by the behavior or by the acting of the reporting entities. Maybe just 2 or 3 minutes to clarify a little bit the three categories. So when we talk about problems with reporting, it's quite well known, I think, in quite a lot of countries that some entities, some reporting entities are not reporting as should be. I think in my country, lawyers, notaries, casinos is a real problem. Second problem I see in that category is that there is no strategy. There is there's no coherent reporting. That's what I see, for example, in the banks. So that's the first category, and also linked to that is the fact that I see that the reporting entities are not reporting aimed on freezing. So we see a lot of reportings that comes too late, because when we do investigations, we are focused on trying to freeze, seize, and confiscate. And when entities report too late, the money is gone. It's a problem we see in quite a lot of cases. Lack of capacity, I think that's the second category, is quite obvious. I think the entities themselves experience this problem, but it's not good for an investigation when we have to wait more than 4 or 5 weeks for the information we request. And then the last, and to my personal opinion, the most specific and most interesting problem is that reporting entities are interfering in investigations. Sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly. I illustrate this with 2 problems I saw recently in quite important cases, and you see it especially in important cases, that once I ask information to, for example, financial institutions, they start reporting to the FYU. In delicate cases, this might be a problem, and this is a problem, and I already experienced this as a problem, because in delicate cases, there is always the problem of leakage, especially when you talk about a lot of money, and this is what is happening. Another problem is, for example, that once the investigation is started, the reporting entities stop their business, their relation with the clients. So also doing that, and it's unwillingly, they interfering in investigations. In investigation, in fact, they make aware there is an investigation to their clients unwillingly, and that is a big problem in the big cases. This also this kind of behavior is also what I see in the investigation happening on purpose. Sometimes you see there is information leaking from the reporting entity to the clients. And the last aspect, and it's also in the most recent cases that I see that, is that, for example, notaries and lawyers try to help their clients to make the problem as small as possible, and then in fact they are involved almost, and this is what has happened in recently in my country, my cases, in the case then themselves. So quite long introduction, just to tell you quite a lot of problems I experience with the reporting entities.
Thank you very much. There seems to be quite a few problems in the collaboration between the competent authorities and the private sector in what you are reporting. So I would like to ask the representative of Interpol, because again, in the investigation area, do you find the same problems in the relationship between competent authorities and obliged entities?
Thank you very much. Well, yes. But first of all, we have to bear in mind that in the course of money laundering investigations, basically we handle three types of information: bank information, tax information, and patrimonial information. The first two are closed and subject to judicial order, and therefore that is our first obstacle to overcome, because we don't always have it in time and with the extension that we wish. Regarding the bank information, we should also distinguish between requests made in the course of long-term investigation for money laundering and those made in the framework of complaints filed for financial frauds, which require urgent measures. Regarding the former, we could say that the level of awareness and compliance is quite acceptable. There is always room for improvement in terms of response time, quantity and quality, but we are reasonably satisfied. However, for urgent requests made for financial fraud, in which there is no time to request and proceed judicial orders, because in a matter of hours, the defrauded funds may have traveled through several countries, even continents, we are observing an almost generalized default, despite of the current legislation, by the way, because as you know, it allows and encourages obliged entities to immediately adopt the necessary risk mitigation measures without any judicial order. Perhaps additional legislation would be required to address this issue in order to clarify it. The third category of information, the patrimonial information principle, well, is accessible to law enforcement agencies without restriction. In this area, the main obstacles came from the absence of centralized registers and perhaps the lack of enough awareness and training to recognize money laundering activities. It is true that probably we cannot require them to behave as a police officer, but without that, with sufficient training, sharing manuals of good practice among member countries, the number of quality of the transaction supervisory reports will increase. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So do you think that there is an improvement in the level of cooperation between competent authorities and legal entities?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think we have to work more together to exchange information in both ways. We should know how they work and how we work, to know what we are looking for, what we need. We have to of course, to avoid some barriers, some legal barriers that avoid some better channels to exchange information, because we are finding still quite obstacles to exchange information overall with the financial institutes, entities. So yeah, there is still something to improve. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask then, Ms. Bonazzi, whether in the terms of analysis and investigation, what do you think are the problems between this collaboration? Are there any, are there obstacles that you find when trying to analyze and investigate it? And how much time are the competent authorities needed in order to select all the information from the legal entities?
Thank you, FT. Just one moment. Well, okay. So you've mentioned two very critical factors that affect the success of our operations. So our analysis, timeliness, but also indirectly the quality of the information. That's quite an important aspect too. So generally, we've noticed an increase. So over the years, it has always been the case that suspicious transaction reports are increasing. So for example, as of the 1st of October, we've received more suspicious transaction reports than we received for all of 2019. So definitely by the end of December, we would have continued increasing. But unfortunately, reporting isn't even across all the sectors. It's mostly the financial institutions, the banks and the remote gaming companies who have a large remote gaming industry here in Malta, but with the DNFBP's reporting tends to lack, and this doesn't really match. It doesn't really match the profile of Malta as a country. So this is a problem when you consider that we've had a large real estate boom in Malta, or that we have a large company service provider sector in Malta with many foreign-owned companies registered in Malta. You would expect to see more suspicious transaction reports. So that is a problem. When it comes to timeliness, timely access to information is fundamental to our success. So the time we take to process a case depends a lot on how quickly we can receive the information that we need. So if we have to send reminders, which sometimes we do, this is affecting our efficiency. So Malta obliged entities have to respond to a request for information within 5 days. And if it's urgent, so for instance, in the case of a suspicion of funding of terrorism, we can shorten this. Many entities respond in time, thankfully, that's something we remark, but not always, but it's not always the case. And this delay is justified by the obliged entity saying that the information we requested the person isn't their client, but this is a wrong approach. So even if the person is not your client, you still have to give us a nil reply so that we can stop following that lead and continue on a new lead. But I think we can all recognize that requests for information are burdensome on both the obliged entities, but also the FIAUs ourselves. And so even better perhaps than timely access is direct access. And we see that we're moving more and more towards direct access to information. So this is eliminating some of those problems, some of those barriers somewhat. So earlier we spoke about the implementation of beneficial ownership registries, which lets us query information and getting directly. And then the fifth anti-money laundering directive requires the setting up of centralized bank account registries. So also this gives us direct access to information on persons who hold bank accounts in Malta. And as the Honourable Judge Theobil mentioned earlier, this also reduces the possibility, the risk of tipping off. So the less requests for information we make, the less we show who we are carrying out the analysis on. I suppose we're happy with the increase in reports, if only these could increase across all sectors evenly, but that's something that as competent authorities, I feel we have a duty to try and improve. So we're continuously working on guidance documents and organizing training events and participating in third-party training events to improve awareness of risk factors, of sector-specific red flags, providing case studies to help the obliged entities recognize suspicions. And now we're also moving towards a drive in enhancing the quality of the suspicious transaction reports. So you have to recognize that many times the link between the criminal and the crime come from a piece of information from within the STR. So sometimes obliged entities remark that we are asking them or we're expecting them to carry out the work of law enforcement authorities. But the truth is that only obliged entities have visibility over certain individual transactions. So this is great power and oversight that competent authorities such as FIUs unfortunately do not have. So in other words, the information that you send to the FIAU is extremely important, or that you send to your financial intelligence units across your countries is extremely important, as you are the only persons who can see the transactions that are about to take place. So we are also working on reducing the barriers to suspicious transaction reporting. And I think once again, I think competent authorities have a duty or an obligation to understand what the different barriers are and to try and overcome them rather than require more and more STRs perhaps without recognizing what the root cause is. And even when it comes to the quality of the STR. So this is a problem because the quality isn't always the same across across all sectors. So just a reminder, the SDR isn't an exercise in creative writing, but following a number of principles. So a clear description of the suspicion itself. So outlining the factors that caused you to suspect that something is going wrong. So the red flags and the factors, you need to channel that information to us because we can't see it. Providing full identification information on the parties and the documents you collected, more information about the relationship that you have and any transactional patterns, copies of relevant documents such as the draft contracts or evidence of payments. And if you carried out a further analysis on some other information, so for example, you examine the bank statement, then you also need to highlight this. But yes, generally, our relationship with the reporting entities in terms of reporting is improving. We recognize that there are some barriers, but it's also up to us to work together with the obliged entities and their representative bodies to try and understand what the issues are.
Can I just react on this remark? Because can I?
Yes, of course, please.
Because of course, you need to make a difference between first the FYU and the role of the FYU, who has a role as a filter between the obliged entities and the law enforcement. So I agree that the cooperation with the FYUs and the obliged entities in quite a lot of countries, and I think in almost all countries in Europe, is quite good. It's quite good, logical that it's good because they are also supervising on them. This is not a case when we talk about law enforcement, and the FYU is just a start of a money laundering investigation, but the real investigation is after the FYU, when law enforcement starts with it. And then you see that the cooperation with obliged entities and the law enforcement is not as good as the FYU reports. No, there is even not a cooperation, and that is something that can be improved to really work together in a kind of public-private cooperation, because now the only thing that is happening is me as an investigating judge asking additional information and receiving all the information. Not always quick enough, but I receive the information, but not analyzed, not really into focus. For example, in one of my last cases, I had to ask additional information about more than 100 accounts. If I have a good cooperation with the bank, I can talk with them, ask them, discuss with them what I need, but it's not possible. There is not such a cooperation. This has to be established, to my personal opinion, and the only thing we receive is tons of paper, trying to start and trying to find what we need. So on that was a small parenthesis that I wanted to make, because it's important to make the difference between FYU and law enforcement as such.
So, in your opinion, do you think that the authority, the obliged entities, should actually give more information directly to other competent authorities than the FIUs?
In the second, so you have the first phase is intelligence, is reporting suspicious transactions. I think the only partner in that is the FYU, because on that phase you have confident information that has to stay within the banks, and the FYU can play his role as a filter. But once an investigation is started up, then I think there should be a cooperation and there should be an exchange of information. In fact, there is an exchange of information. When I ask it, they are obliged to give the additional information, but this is not on an active way, on a dynamic way, and that is what I would suggest. And of course, it will need additional legal initiatives, but I think a public-private cooperation can help to make the investigation, and that is even the most important, to my opinion, the investigation itself, more effective and more efficient, and that is what is lacking at the moment.
Thank you very much. I just would like now to hear from the legal entities. And actually, I would like to give the floor to Angela Foyle and ask her what is the level of awareness about the obligations in anti-money laundering in your field, and whether these obligations, is it in agreement with the level of compliance and sanctions that are applied?
Thank you very much. I should probably just say that I am a qualified accountant. I am not a notary or a lawyer, and I've worked in an accounting firm for probably the best part of 30 years, and the last 10 of them I was the money laundering reporting officer and head of economic crime for a UK large accounting practice. So I tend to speak from the practitioner's perspective rather than necessarily that of other parties. I think there's two or three elements to this question. The first is, what is the level of awareness? And then the second part says, is it congruent with the level of compliance and sanctions? I'd quite like to turn that a little bit, because the question, I think, should be, is it congruent with the importance of having that level of awareness? And given that importance, are the level of sanctions and compliance congruent with the obligations and the importance of getting it right? So I'd like to turn it around a little bit, if I may, because I think certainly in discussions with supervisors in the UK and also discussions with law enforcement and government bodies, there is a view that the level of awareness is not as high in certain sectors as it should be. And I think from discussions with European colleagues, that seems to be a view that is shared across a number of jurisdictions. One of the issues, I think, particularly for the designated non-financial businesses and professions, is that they're very, very broad. You go everywhere from a very large multinational type organization down to a single practitioner on a high street. And so the level of awareness, the level of understanding is going to vary quite significantly. The gaps that are identified typically on supervisory visits are and actually are reflected in conversations that you can have with people in practice who are not necessarily specialists in the field, tend to be around risk awareness. Do they understand the risks both posed by their business and their clients? Do they understand how to apply a risk-based approach when carrying out due diligence? And that's certainly been one of the aspects. And I think that flows into failures potentially in due diligence and also potentially failures in reporting. The second is there an awareness of the importance of this subject? And I would say again that there are certainly areas where that understanding of the importance, that it is a major public function to try and drive out money laundering, terrorist financing, is very, very high. But then particularly towards those on the smaller end where they have a range of responsibilities and have to try and keep up with all of their client, both their client obligations and technical obligations, there can be that lack of connection between the obligation to carry out due diligence and money laundering procedures and what's it got to do with their client base, which comes back to that risk-based approach. Having said that, are the level of penalties and sanctions for compliance sufficient to reflect that? Well, I think potentially they are, but I think one of the complaints that you do hear is that there hasn't been perhaps the same level of enforcement on non-banks as there has been on the banking sector. And certainly the banks in the UK would say that that's driven much better behavior amongst the financial sector and that maybe other sectors need to catch up. I think everything does have to be proportionate, and there certainly are penalties and sanctions, including restricting people's ability to operate. But I do think that there has to be strong supervision and strong enforcement where there are clear failures, because without that, those who are putting the time and resources and trying to ensure that the right thing is done end up being disadvantaged in a way, because they've incurred costs and actually are trying to keep the business operating in not only a legal but a socially responsible way, whereas others don't. So there is that aspect to it. But I think there are gaps in awareness. I think that we've heard other speakers talk about training programs. There continue to be training programs, but there also has to be some effective enforcement where you have clear breaches.
Thank you very much. But I wanted to ask whether the regulations are clear enough to the legal entities. Do we think that there is more guidance to be provided, or everything is clear? What is given, the information given by the competent authorities are clear in this respect? And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kaiser in order to discuss whether there should be more guidance in the regulations about money laundering.
Thank you for the question, and good afternoon. May I very briefly come back to the previous question? I would like to react to the comments I've heard about the awareness in the financial and in the banking sector about a number of aspects of financial crime. I think there is awareness about the importance of money laundering, financial crime, and also terrorism. I think we are well aware that we are not talking about simple white-collar crime. Behind money laundering, there are criminal organizations. So it's a very important topic for the society. Now, as to the awareness about the risks and the obligation, I think the banks are the gatekeepers of the financial systems. So they control the access of clients to the financial systems. And I think competent authorities rely on banks in the fight against financial crime. There is also, I think, an increasing awareness of the ineffectiveness of the current EU AML framework. It is clearly highlighted by the recurrent scandals, and it's also evidenced by the very low proportion of money laundering cases that are prosecuted compared to the massive flow of suspicious activities reports that are filed by obliged entities. And I can assure you that as a European Banking Federation, so the voice of European banks, we want to be at the forefront of the fight against financial crime. Now, moving to your question about the clarity of the regulation and potential need for guidance. I think there is a consensus view among all stakeholders, whether they are public or private, that one of the big issues in the current system is that there is a regulatory fragmentation. So we need a regulatory harmonization. The fact that the AML directives provide only for minimum harmonization has led to significant divergences in the implementation and interpretation of the framework across the member states. And this has complicated the work of regulators, the work of competent authorities, of law enforcement, of obliged entities, multinational banking groups, which have not been able to develop EU-wide policies and procedures. And last but not least, it has enabled criminals to exploit the weakest jurisdictions. So harmonization is very important. Now, very briefly, what should be the content of harmonization? If I had to prioritize what should be in the rule book. We need a risk-based approach. It has absolutely to be clarified. We need modernization of the KYC policy, and we also need technological neutrality, so a level playing field between the various actors which provide the same services. And all this, I think the regulation should also be complemented by clear guidance. In the case of the banking sector, it's the European Banking Authority which has to deliver detailed and updated guidance so that we have a fully harmonized set of standards.
Thank you very much. So I think that you need more rules, harmonized rules in the whole Europe in order to be able to act in the anti-money laundering situation. So in that note, and after hearing that sometimes notaries try to help their clients, I would actually want to address a question to Ignacio Goma, which is the chairman of the anti-money laundering working group in CNUE. And I would like to ask him, in the case of notaries, what do you think, how do you think notaries can help in this situation, in the anti-money laundering situation? What information do you think they can give, and how?
Good morning. Thank you for your invitation. So really, I'm the president of the working group in AML, but I am especially a Spanish notary. So I would like to tell us my experience in this matter. First of all, I would like to make two preliminary considerations about all of this matter. The first is that what I think that's important is not what kind of information, but how much information is to be provided and how is it going to be provided. The second consideration is that I'm going to speak from the point of view of Spanish notary, that is from the point of view of a legal professional that at the same time is a civil servant of the Spanish state. And that although there are common rules imposed by the European directives on AML for all obligated entities, the peculiarity of the Spanish system lies in the development of these rules. From my point of view, with some principles I have invented especially for this occasion, our peculiar development of collaboration is based in 4 principles: transparency, intermediation, objectivization, and collaboration. The transparency is the basis of everything. Every 2 weeks, as I think Silvina told you in the first panel, we, the Spanish notaries, prepare the so-called single computerized index. That is, we send to our General Counsel the parameterized information of all documentation that passes through our offices. And that information is distributed by our council to each interesting institution. For example, City Council will receive the information precise for municipal taxes, autonomous regional communities for regional taxes, and of course, anti-money launderings will receive the information required. I would like to say that for Spanish notaries, this is a great effort, because going from paper or from Word program to from a Word file to an information in a platform that asks you even to specify how the price has been paid, for example, implies a similar effort to that involved in drafting the contract, for example. So it's a big effort for us, but I think this index is very useful for the authorities in general. The second principle is intermediation. It's a key too. It means that in Spain, there are an internal prevention body called OCP, located inside within the council, but independent from notaries, and made up of technicians who, on the one hand, help notaries to fulfill their obligations, and in the other hand, carry their own investigations. The advantage for the notary is that the communications of suspicions are made to this body, which will supervise and will communicate them to the FIU only if it is relevant. So it's a notary-friendly body. In addition, this body can make its own autonomous investigations using the index we have sent and communicate from the FIU the results of that investigations, which is obviously a very important element of investigation and collaboration. The other principle is the objectivity of this principle allows me to avoid being immersed in the subjectivity that surrounds the fight against money laundering, which is a liquid and polymorphic crime, always difficult to apprehend, because what he seeks is precisely the hide money. The notary moves badly in the suspicion when his work is to give certainty and provide faith, public faith. That is why we are grateful to the OCP, because it has created an important list of quite precise indicators that in some way facilitate the work, our work, by making it clear when an operation has to be communicated, even if appearances do not make you think that the operation is suspicious. And the final principle is collaboration. I connect with the idea I said in the beginning. We belong to the state. We are civil servant. The notary is part of the state because he's a public servant. So in no case should be part of the problem, but part of the solution. This means that many authorities, not some, have access to our index to obtain direct information of the operation we authorize or we do. And our independent body make, as I have said, autonomous investigations using the index, crossing information, using, for example, you are studying a person, you can know how many operation has made in Spain, in all notaries. So it's an important way to discover criminal patterns that can be communicated to the FIU without the need of a specific complaint and a specific information provided for a notary, or even more so if there is one. No? So this is, I think, the 4 principles. I can add perhaps something that belongs to the first panel, that is we have created a database of beneficial owners created by the information provided by the notaries. So it's a real information, because in Spain we have the competence of the contracts of sales of shares. So we do of the business transmissions, all the business sales, shares, everything related with incorporation of companies. So we can provide faithful information about who is the beneficial owner of a company. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to ask you, do you think that in Spain, the notaries do what they need to in order to combat money laundering?
Well, I think we do a lot of, and I think authorities are satisfied. I think first of all because they know everything we do, everything they can know it, and they can know it not immediate. In 15 days, they know what we do. If you have, for example, a contract of a sale of an apartment, they are going to know the price, the seller, the buyer, the apartment, everything. No, so they can cross information. Not all authorities, only some authorities. Obviously, it can't be known by everybody, but the competent authorities, tax authorities, anti-money laundering authorities can have this information, and they can ask for a specific document, for example. First of all, this. After that, the normal collaboration. So we have some indicators, and the notary must inform when some indicators have appeared in a special business. So there are the two things, the objective information we give, and the normal collaboration, informing when you have suspicion of an operation. And in my opinion, the best collaboration is technology. So when you can use technology to facilitate this information, everything is easier, I think. So authorities can know immediately what we do. So, okay, I don't know if all obliged entities can do that, because we belong to the state too. So while civil servant, perhaps our point of view is different, but I think technology must help our collaboration and reduce the subjectivity there exists always in this matter, because we are not police officers. We are not trained to make suspicions. No, so I think technology can help us to collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's move to France and Stéphanie Siro. And I would like to ask you, what are the mechanisms that competent authorities have applied in your country in order to increase awareness and compliance? I'm sorry, we cannot hear you.
Stephanie, hello.
Yeah, it's better now, sorry.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I was saying that, well, quite a lot of trainings are being organized in our countries between the FIUs and also our authorities, professional authorities. Of course, and unfortunately, these trainings are not compulsory. So, of course, it's important maybe to communicate more on these obligations that all the notaries now should have regarding AML. The notaries who are better aware of this should then make sure that their staff, their employees are well aware of these obligations and carry out some internal controls within their offices. The problem that we have, and well, I'm talking as a practitioner, but also having discussed this point with my colleagues notary, is that we do not exactly know what the FIU do with our information that we provide them with. We feel that, well, we have to collect a lot of information. We do not always have access to the right information because, well, apart from trying to find some information on internet, trying to get some information regarding the effective beneficiary, knowing these sometimes when we start setting up companies, because in that case, we need to provide to the registry, commercial registry, the information on the effective beneficiaries, also when doing a transfer of shares, this is not compulsorily done by a notary. So therefore, all these things are quite difficult for us to access. And so, as I was saying, apart from internet, some guidance which are published by our professional authorities, or also the access that we now have to the Dow Jones basis, it's difficult for us to collect all the information that our IFUs are expecting from us. Also, declaring is very time consuming for us because, well, we have to provide lots of details regarding the clients, regarding the transaction. And as I was saying, again, it's really our responsibility to find these answers. And well, we have a trust relationship with our clients, as all notaries have. And it's sometimes quite difficult for us either to investigate directly our clients or to try to find that information somewhere else. So the FIU do not make any feedback. So we feel that we provide information, but we do not really know what they are doing with it. So of course, we expect them to then carry out some investigations. But well, we all wish that we could have more cooperation with the other activities and especially financial institutions, I would say, and lawyers, in order to say that, well, when we are working on the same case or for the same client on the same transaction, why not having a kind of common database which would enable us to collect information where the lawyers, the notaries, the financial institutions would have already given and provided their information, given their experience with the client and on the transaction. We feel sometimes that we are doing things which have been maybe already done by other professionals working on the same case. So we feel that, again, more coordination between the professions would be very helpful and less time consuming maybe for us notaries, and I'm sure for the other professions as well, so that we could have access to information which actually could be shared by the other professionals, but at least would be something that I think would be very helpful, having a kind of central database, and therefore would also help us to maybe better understand cross-border situation and cases and things that we do not exactly know in one country or the other. In other words, get more familiar with hidden or yet unknown dangers in cross-border scenarios. That's my feeling.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask you, do you think that in giving information, you should be in any way protected?
Yeah, that's a good remark. Again, as I was saying, since we have no feedback at all from our IFUs, we do not exactly, again, know if we are really protected witnesses. Are we going to be appealed in a court proceeding one day or not? We try to be as secret as possible because, as you know, we are not, we must not communicate the fact that we have declared. So this is very strictly observed. But still, we do not have any details as to whether or not we are protected witnesses. This is very opaque. So again, although TRACFIN, our IFU, tries to make some training to explain us what they do, and I respect what they're doing, no problem at all from that perspective, it's quite opaque for us on many sides, and the question of who we are towards them is a question that is not clearly answered to. So again, I wish we would be officially regarded as protected witnesses in case anything happens and in case a lawsuit would need to be put in place.
Thank you. Actually, that comment takes me to my next question, which is whether you consider that information provided by legal entities should be allowed to be used in prosecuting money laundering cases, or only just as an intelligence information. And I would like to ask that first of all to our judge to the judge of our panel, also to the investigator in Interpol. What is your opinion?
Let me first say, I think the remark of my colleague here before is a very interesting remark and can lead us to another discussion of 1 or 2 hours. To my opinion, just briefly on what she was saying, she has a legal obligation and she has to report change of information. And I understand you want to know what's happening with the case. I can understand you need some feedback, but sharing one to the other information, I don't think that's the idea of EMLA, and it would lead to more problems. But let me come to the question very more specific, and it's additional to what I was saying. When we talk about STRs, when we talk about financial institutions or obliged entities that are reporting, I think this is confidential information and this should stay like that. So out of discussion that this can't be used as evidence, not as the beginning of evidence. This has to stay out of the case. This is confidential. Something else is about the reports of the FYU. There you can discuss about what's the value of the report of the FYU. And when you look to the different systems all over Europe or all over the world, you will see different systems. Sometimes it's not cannot be used as information as evidence. Sometimes it can be used as information but needs to be confirmed. Sometimes just partly of the FYU reports can be confirmed. I think the most important thing that should be organized or established is a clear legal definition or a legal provision that stipulates what the value of an FYU report is. So it's the end of discussion. When you look to Belgium, the country where I work, we have the Supreme Court that clearly states that the information of the FYU is intelligence and needs to be confirmed. So it's a system that works. It works quite well. And what we do is once we receive a report of the FYU is just asking all institutions that reported or that has the information to provide the information to us. I think it's a good system, a system that works, but I don't see a problem that when you have information in the FYU report that is data, clear data, for example, from bank records, where the additional information and documents are added, that could be evidence. I don't see the problem me asking the same data as are in the report. Why not just not losing time and allowing that to be as evidence? But my clear and really definite hard remark and clear point of view in this aspect is that it should be stipulated in the law what the value of such an FYU report is. But I don't think this is not the case in Belgium, and I don't think in Europe there are countries that stipulates what the value is, but it should be like that.
Thank you very much. How about Interpol? What do you think in the same question?
Thank you. Well, it will essentially make our work easier for sure. We are not allowed to include the full report from the FIU, but what we used to do is just to include some part of it in or some part of its content. The method is accepted in some jurisdictions, but it will be much easier for us if we will just copy and paste. I mean the reports, because they are very well done, you know. So yeah, from our opinion, it will make our work definitely easier. Yeah.
Thank you very much. In order to conclude our discussion with this panel, I would like to ask a question for all of you, actually, and have your comments in order to see. I would like to ask you, how do you consider that the cooperation between competent authorities and obliged entities can be enhanced? So I'll start with you on Teopil, and then we should move on to all participants in order to have their opinion.
I make it short because I already mentioned my opinion on this. The public-private cooperation, public-private partners is an idea that can change the cooperation, but even a bit more awareness about the work, the one from each other, but also my colleagues to the reporting entities and to the people that has to report, a bit of common understanding, but also have a bit common contact with each other, like meetings like this, for example, talking with each other, discussing with each other, and knowing our own problems. Those two aspects, I think, can enhance the cooperation.
Thank you very much. Who else actually wants to answer this question? Yes, please, Angela.
Sorry, I just needed to take it off mute. I'd like to sort of just answer this by referring back to something that Roger said earlier about the fact that I think there's a wider recognition that the current system isn't perhaps working as well as it should. When you have suspicious activity reports increasing at the rate that they're currently increasing, which I think Clara mentioned in Malta, and in the UK there's been exponential growth over the last 5 years. So I think I would take the point that our esteemed judge made about public-private partnerships. I think that looking at understanding the information that each holds, trying to build together a holistic understanding of how criminals and other bad actors move across the entire financial system, using notaries, using accountants, going through the banks, actually would enhance things immensely. That requires quite a lot of work and input, and it requires work both from the competent authorities, law enforcement and others, so that they have to share the information. And there are some barriers. There's the confidential information barriers. There's the concerns that Stephanie has already mentioned around the protection of those who provide the information. There's understanding what is suspicion, what is fact, because we also have the laws of defamation that we need to consider. So definitely think that it's something that should be done. It's something that I've been working in the UK on with the UK government. I'm on the public-private steering group for this type of cooperation, have been for about 3-4 years. But there are issues around this in ensuring that there are legal gateways and clear legal frameworks in which these public-private partnerships and increased cooperation can work. And that those are quite clear. So I think a number of the panelists have already referred to this, and I just sort of emphasize that as well.
Thank you very much. Clara?
Thank you. So I think I emphasized as well, it was the main theme of my comments earlier, but it's very good for authorities to keep an open relationship with the obliged entities. And I know the audience is mainly obliged entities, so depending on what the situation is in your country, it's good to keep a good relationship with your authorities, if not directly, but through the sector representatives, because they play a very good role in bridging. So the private sector representatives, the representative bodies, they play a good role in bridging perhaps the gap between the FIU and the practitioner, but also at the same time they help to safeguard the reputation of the particular profession. Because as you know, if there is a scandal that involves a bank or that involves a company service provider or a notary, unfortunately it will affect the reputation of that entity. But likewise, at the same time, the obliged entities need assistance from their representatives to make sure that the laws can be implemented in a manner that is practical. So it's a bit of a two-way relationship. I understand that as a competent authority, we take a lot. As a supervisor, we take risk data. We ask for information on customers, and we enforce. So unfortunately, we also impose penalties and other administrative measures. But we also give. So we provide guidance, we provide training, we provide feedback on STR. So naturally it has to be a two-way relationship. And this is a great way to at least start to eradicate some of the barriers that there are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clara. Roger?
Yes, if I may, thank you. I fully concur with all that has been said, and particularly by Angela. I think we have absolutely to move from a tick-the-box approach in the EU AML framework to an intelligence-led approach. And in that context, the public-private partnerships are absolutely key. They should be equipped with a mechanism to operationally share information. And what should be clarified is GDPR and private data privacy aspect. We absolutely need a guidance, an AML guidance of GDPR. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stephanie?
Well, again, as I was saying, insist on this protection of the witness, know exactly what our information are going, how they will be treated. And I think try maybe to create a kind of central database where we could access in order to collect more information and again, try to be better in the declarations that we must submit in order, as we were all saying, to have some better guidances, to know and to better understand what the standards, the high, the enhanced risks are. And well, again, being really trained and have the notaries on a kind of national-wide basis better understand that they have high obligations in that field and must really make sure that they comply with all the obligations that the FIU await from them.
Thank you very much. Noah?
Thank you. Well, finally, I will say that I think the most important thing is to remove the legal barriers to allow the financial institution, for example, to share the information with the police directly for urgent cases without sharing with the FIU. I think it will be a very, very important point and something that we have to think about.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Ignacio.
Thank you. To be short and in the same line I use in my precedent intervention, for me, the most important thing is to be conscious of the problem, to be aware. And you are going to be conscious when you train, when you you understand the problem, when you understand how criminals act, how they do their crimes. So the first of all, for me, is training. When you understand this, you see the problems different. Second, you must make it easy for you. So how do you do that? With tools, technological tools, and with other instruments as indicators to make your intervention at least objective. So it would be more easy for you when everything is clear. And finally, this means money and effort and money. So we must be conscious that we are fighting against money laundering. There are very difficult crimes, very liquid crimes, very polymorphic crimes. We probably don't understand very easily when we are working. So we must be prepared to understand this and to create the necessary tools to fight against these very, very hidden crimes. Thank you.
Thank you very much all for participating in this panel. I hope that our discussion provided useful information regarding the cooperation between the public and private sector in the fight against money laundering. And I would like to ask whether there are any questions.
Thank you, Evtichia. Maybe a contribution from the side of the CNUE office in Brussels. Since it seems that this webinar was reaching its goals, namely to put together the reflections of more professions, which in the end are asking for even more cooperation, I suggest that we sort of consolidate the efforts that we started today in a mechanism maybe of cooperation among these professions, and to, let's say, to institutionalize these in regular consultations that we could host, that other professions could host in the future. Let us maybe explore these fields, and I would like now to turn to the technical team and to say, to ask whether there are questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you. We have a question from Mrs. Mariona Fenech. Please, Mariona, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. During the morning session, Ms. Prună has rightly mentioned that FIUs are flooded with STRs, and this shows that obliged entities are doing their job in reporting wrongdoing. The problem that is encountered in our sector, and I believe mostly in all sectors, is that once a subject person files an STR, there is no guidance whatsoever as to how to tackle the transaction itself. Should it be suspended? Should it be halted? Contrarily to what Madame Siro has mentioned, in France, in Malta, we do have a rating on our report as to the contents and information that we would have forwarded to the FIU. And yet no one is tackling the huge issue as to how to face the customers in front of us and the eventual possible litigation, because as a notary, I would have refused to work on the file following a submission of an STR. We are not given the right protection, as was highlighted before my intervention before. Thank you.
Do you address this question to someone from the panel?
Well, I believe to Dr. Clara Borg Bonacci. Maybe she could reply to my question.
Hi,
Yes.
Notary Maronia. Yes, I'll take care of this. I know this is an issue that comes up from time to time, and this is also because we meet with the Notarial Council regularly to understand what issues there are. So that's one of the examples of good cooperation that we have with the sectors, where we recognize what the issues are and what's holding notaries or other entities, other sectors from reporting. We understand that this is an issue, but it's not something that can be resolved through particular changes in the law, even because of the time that it takes to postpone a transaction. So the time that the FIAU imposes for the postponement of a transaction isn't sufficient to carry out an analysis in depth to determine whether there is suspicion. So this leaves the subject person in a state of limbo. Should I proceed with the transaction, but then be at risk of facilitating money laundering? But then at least if it was a house purchase, then we know that the house is there, and if the authorities want to confiscate that, then they can. But then am I exposing myself to legal risk from the supervisor or legal risk from the client ourselves? Yes, this is a very challenging aspect, and something that we recognize as a barrier, but something that we are working on. Ultimately, we don't tell banks what to tell their customers when they're delaying a transaction. Neither can we tell notaries what to tell their customers. But perhaps if there is time, I don't know if there is time, it might be interesting, perhaps if not in this forum, notary, to discuss with other notaries abroad what they do in such situations. But perhaps the legal framework there is a bit different. So this is one example of one of the barriers that we are facing that isn't so easy to break down. But nevertheless, I have to emphasize the importance of reporting suspicious transactions, and do not let certain obstacles, certain perceived fears from holding you back from fulfilling your duty to report a transaction which you suspect involves money laundering.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question?
We have another question from Mr. Benoit Beldens. Mr. Beldens, can you hear us?
Benoit, est-ce que vous pouvez nous entendre? the microphone is not switched on. No, we cannot hear.
Voilà, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui.
Maintenant, c'est bon?
Oui, c'est bon.
Voilà. Voilà, ma question, en fait, je rebondis sur la question, enfin, ou une remarque de Monsieur Kaiser à propos du RGPD. Donc, il est attendu des entités assujetties, donc les notaires, les avocats, les experts comptables et autres professionnels soumis à cette législation, donc d'effectuer un véritable profiling des clients. Hein. Dans le jargon, on utilise l'expression le KYC, hein, Know Your Customer. Et ces obligations en matière de connaissance du client vont parfois très très loin. Hein, si on pense à l'identification des personnes, donc des personnes exposées politiquement, les PEPs, hein, on est avec la directive et certainement les dernières modifications qu'elle a subies, enfin avec la 5e directive, on devrait connaître les personnes qui sont en relation, qui sont connues pour avoir des relations avec le client en question. Et si ces personnes ont le profil de personnes politiquement exposées, on doit alors augmenter le niveau de vigilance par rapport à ces personnes. Il existe sur le marché des outils, des banques de données, et Maître Siro a parlé de la banque de données Dow Jones là tantôt. Donc c'est un accès payant à ce genre d'outils. Ce sont des gigantesques banques de données. Et une des questions, moi c'est une question qui me taraude depuis bien longtemps, c'est est-ce que ces outils, hein, qui rassemblent énormément de données, est-ce que ces outils ne sont pas en contravention avec le règlement européen sur la protection des données? Est-ce que, donc, moi je n'ai pas encore eu la réponse à ce niveau-là, et je me demandais si parmi les panélistes, cette question avait déjà aussi été étudiée.
Alors, si je peux me permettre, bon, c'est bien sûr la question qui se pose. Hein.
Thank you very much.
Sorry?
Roger, should you answer this question?
Yes, but I think the micro is not
Yes,
working.
it's good. It's good. We can hear you.
Okay. So I was starting in French, but I can turn to English. So what I was saying is that it is indeed a key question. I think when we are talking about those due diligence reporting requirements which are specifically provided by a law based on the AMLD, there are no problem. We can say that there are no problem with GDPR. The problem emerges when it comes to two aspects, in my view, the PPPs and the shared utilities. I don't have an answer at this stage. It is something on which we as European Banking Federation are working. It very much depends on how the directives and the GDPR have been translated in national law. But there is a very good example for a recent example, which is Transaction Monitoring Netherlands, TNML, where there have been discussions between public and private stakeholders, and they have indeed clarified how the GDPR must be interpreted so as to provide a balance between the GDPR requirements and an effective prevention of crime, meaning an effective use of the shared utilities.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
No, we don't have questions anymore. We thank you for the questions. Thank
so
you for
again,
the
I would like to thank everybody for being part of this discussion. I hope it was quite an interesting one. So we leave you to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eftichia, to you and to all panelists. it was indeed a dense discussion. We noticed that we are running out of time. We are actually very late, but this does not, of course, impeach us to have the final words and the conclusions on behalf of our president, Mr. George Rouskas. I hope he's with you.
Yes, he's here. Thank you very much. Bye-bye from me.
Thank you, Eftichia, again. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Θέλω...
Αγαπητέ Πρόεδρο.
Αγαπητέ Πρόεδρο, αγαπητέ Γραμματεία, είμαι εδώ. Λοιπόν, θέλω να ευχαριστήσω όλους για την υπομονή σας και τη δύναμή σας για να μπορέσει να διοργανωθεί σήμερα, έστω και κάτω από αυτές τις δύσκολες συνθήκες, αυτή η τηλεοπτική ουσιαστική διαδικασία. Αντιλαμβάνομαι ότι όλοι γνωρίζουμε ποιες είναι οι δυσκολίες ενός σεμιναρίου, πολύ περισσότερο όταν γίνεται κάτω από αυτές τις συγκεκριμένες συνθήκες. Διαπιστώνω ότι είχαμε ένα μεγάλο αριθμό συμμετοχόντων και θα ήθελα επιγραμματικά να επισημάνω τα εξής. Αρχικά θέλω να ευχαριστήσω όλους τους ομιλητές που με πολύ μεγάλη υπομονή, εξειδίκευση και θα έλεγα και ουσιαστική δύναμη και ενθουσιασμό εξέφρασαν τις απόψεις τους και είχαμε μια ουσιαστική ανταλλαγή επάνω στο πολύ σημαντικό ζήτημα του ξεπλήματος του μαύρου χρήματος. Από την άλλη θέλω να ευχαριστήσω τους συντονιστές για τη συγκεκριμένη ουσιαστική συμβολή τους στην σημερινή διαδικασία. Επιγραμματικά αναφέροντας, επισημαίνω ότι στην αρχή του σεμιναρίου μας ακούσαμε με μεγάλη λεπτομέρεια τις πρωτοβουλίες που προτίθεται να λάβει η Επιτροπή για την ενίσχυση του ευρωπαϊκού πλαισίου για την καταπολέμηση της νομιμοποίησης εσόδων από τις παράνομες δραστηριότητες. Θα ακούσουμε και θα ακολουθήσουμε με μεγάλο ενδιαφέρον τις προτάσεις που θα δημοσιευτούν και θα τις ανακοινώσει η Ευρωπαϊκή Επιτροπή στις αρχές του 2021. Στο ουσιαστικό μέρος ακούσαμε τις εμπειρίες των διαφόρων επαγγελματικών ομάδων που εκπροσωπούνται στην σημερινή διαδικασία όσον αφορά τον ορισμό του πραγματικού δικαιούχου, τους εφιστάμενους μηχανισμούς και πρακτικές, καθώς και τις δυσκολίες που συνεπάγεται αυτή η ταυτοποίηση, και όλα αυτά είναι γνωστό σε όλους ότι χρειάζονται και την απαραίτητη καθοδήγηση και τις διαδικασίες λοιπόν οι οποίες μας οδηγούν στα αποτελέσματα αυτά. Γίναμε μάρτυρες μιας ουσιαστικής συζήτησης μεταξύ των αρμοδίων αρχών και των υποχρεωμένων οντοτήτων σχετικά με την έκταση των υποχρεώσεων των υποχρεωμένων οντοτήτων. Είναι ένα πολύ δύσκολο θέμα. Σήμερα θεωρώ ότι το ακουμπήσαμε, μπήκαμε και στην ουσία του. Έχουμε μια σειρά και οι θεσμοί και εμείς και επαγγελματικές ομάδες σχετικά με τις προσδοκίες που έχουν εκδηλωθεί από τις αρχές και πώς θα συμβάλλουμε όλοι στην εμβάθυνση και στην ουσιαστική επεξεργασία των προβληματισμών που θα οδηγήσει στη βελτιοποίηση της συνεργασίας μεταξύ όλων των εμπλεκομένων. Ελπίζω σήμερα η συγκεκριμένη διαδικασία να μας έχει ανταμείψει όλους όσους συμμετείχαμε σε αυτή. Εγώ προσωπικά φεύγω από τη συγκεκριμένη διαδικασία πλουσιότερος. Εν πάση περίπτωση είχαμε την ουσιαστική ευκαιρία να έχουμε ανταλλαγή των απόψεών μας, να λάβουμε υπόψη μας και τις ουσιαστικές απόψεις της Ευρωπαϊκής Επιτροπής και να συμφωνήσουμε φεύγοντας από αυτή την διαδικασία ότι όλοι μας θα συνεργαστούμε για την καταπολέμηση της νομιμοποίησης των εσόδων από παράνομες δραστηριότητες. Σας ευχαριστώ όλους και για τη συμμετοχή σας και για την υπομονή σας και για τη δύναμή σας. Γεια σε όλους, ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your kind words. It remains just to thank to the technical team, to our colleagues, Adriana Cobos, Laura Gonzalez, Guillaume Casanova, qui ont organisé ce séminaire, who organized this seminar, and again to Madame Cloquet, who is here with us. And I would like to wish you all, the participants, all the best, keep safe, and hopefully see you soon in physical presence. Mr. President, thank you very much. Goodbye.